Welcome back to Crawford-Clark Close-Up, the home for reviews of new and classic releases. Here we define the term classic with two gems celebrating their 50th and 70th anniversaries respectively. Ask anyone around to witness the 1969 Academy Awards and they'd probably universally tell you that despite its often convoluted narrative, Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey deserved the title of Best Picture. However, events on the night panned out slightly differently. Film lovers will know that the Academy favour epic pictures and adaptations of classic tomes, and Carol Reed's mammoth musical adaptation of Dickens' 1839 beast Oliver Twist was the big winner of the night, picking up 5 of the big awards. Carol Reed picked up Best Director, John Box and his team rightly picked up Best Art and Set Decoration. Best Sound and Music were also awarded, as well as the big one, Best Picture of 1968. That's right, believe it or not, we've now been humming along to You've Gotta Pick a Pocket or Two, Papa, and Who Will Buy, amongst other classic songs from the extraordinary mind of Lionel Bart, for 50 years. Given a full theatrical release in the UK on September the 27th, 1968, we're celebrating the joy of this lavish adaptation and its half-century of entertaining audiences young and old to the very day. Dickens' novel is as dark as much of the remainder of his work, so some of the side characters and the darker side of the narrative would be toned down significantly for this musical adaptation, and yet the film still stays remarkably close to the spirit of Dickens' work, albeit with song and dance, and some incredible choreography from the legendary Honor White to boot. Despite being nominated for an Oscar for its cinematography, the film's lavish landscapes would lose out on the night, but they're nothing short of amazing, with director Reed taking us deep into the heart of 19th century London, brilliantly juxtaposing the hope and promise of Bloomsbury Square and the opulence of Mr. Brownlow's way of living, with Fagin's dingy den that denies Oliver of any chance of an honest life. For all its vibrancy, without the well-fleshed-out characters from Dickens, you have nothing, and thankfully the core characters are all brought to life superbly on screen, from the perfectly cast Harry Seacombe and Peggy Mount as Mr. and Mrs. Bumble of the parish workhouse, to Ron Moody's standout Fagin, or simply the Jew, in Dickens' world. From the outset, we're treated to fantastic songs that have become ingrained in the consciousness of the viewer, whether you're a fan of this kind of storytelling or not, from the rousing Food, Glorious Food that opens the film, up to the joyous yet ultimately devastating Papa in the final act. It's all thanks to the writing talent of Lionel Bart, who has seen Oliver and his music jump from the West End stage, where it debuted in 1960, to this 1968 motion picture, as well as countless amateur productions over the years, a revival from director Sam Mendes back on the London stage in 1994, and the BBC were getting involved with a search to find Oliver and Nancy for a London production which debuted in 2009 as the film was celebrating 40 years. For fans of the show, like this reviewer, it was a joy to see Rowan Atkinson bring his version of Fagin to life in his own inimitable fashion, as well as now West End star Jodie Prenger proving the only Nancy to rival the brilliance of Shani Wallis in the film musical. Oliver flies by like a dream, each sequence and musical number segueing seamlessly into another, and the acting is fantastic across the board. Even the child actors, with 8-year-old novice Mark Lester embedding naivety and curiosity in equal measure to the eponymous lead. Jack Wilde, having played the role of the Artful Dodger beforehand on stage, brings an engaging cockiness to proceedings as Fagin's go-to boy to help show Oliver the ropes. The late, great Oliver Reed is suitably intimidating as antagonist Bill Sikes, Ron Moody is outstanding as the scene-stealer Fagin, and Shani Wallis brings great humanity to the ill-fated Nancy. The musical numbers are all winners, the highlights being Fagin and his boys' You Gotta Pick a Pocket or Two, It's a Fine Life, Nancy's stoic introductory song in the tavern, and also Nancy's signature song As Long as He Needs Me, performed with such power by Shani Wallis, a woman aware that her devotion to her lover will surely lead to her downfall. But the standout scene in terms of cinematography is the incredibly orchestrated and coordinated Who Will Buy sequence. You'd be forgiven for thinking that the production shut down the real Bloomsbury Square in London to film the complex number, but it's all a set at the mighty Shepperton Studios just outside of London. For this reviewer, I often get the mickey taken out of me by my grandparents who tell me this was my go-to film whilst growing up, but it's easy to see why. If you're a fan of musicals, Oliver is just about the quintessential British one, and it's been taken into the hearts of generations over the years because it's a splendid film. A happy 50th birthday to Carol Reed's Oliver. In a bad mood? Stick on the Blu-ray and hum along to all the classic tunes and marvel in the amazing cinematography and directional flair of the late Carol Reed. You can't go wrong. We're not ending there, though, because incredibly 20 years earlier from the musical masterpiece came the first straight adaptation of Dickens' novel in feature-length form. The mighty David, Lawrence of Arabia, Bridge on the River Kwai, Lean gave us Oliver Twist on full UK release in October 1948, which this year, incredibly, celebrates 70 years. Closer in tone, naturally, to Dickens' tome, for the absence alone of any big musical numbers, the 1948 Oliver Twist sticks incredibly closely to the novel with a dreary black and white colour palette, but curiously the film was never nominated for any Academy Awards. Its only nomination came from BAFTA for Best British Film of the Year. Banned on its initial release both in Israel for being anti-Semitic and in Egypt for making Fagin the Jew too sympathetic, the film would go on to achieve critical acclaim. Once again, it's all about the superb cast. Robert Newton gives one of the best portrayals of Bill Sikes on screen to date. Kay Walsh is suitably conflicted as the fated Nancy, and also the, at the time, current wife of director David Lean. Francis L. Sullivan is brilliant as the buffoon Mr. Bumble. A young Anthony Newley brings Artful Dodger to life in a brilliant breakout role for the actor. And John Howard Davies made his debut, much like Mark Lester in the 1968 film, at the tender age of 8 in the film as Oliver Twist. If you're a fan of classic British comedies like Fawlty Towers and Mr. Bean, you might be interested to hear that Davies' acting career was short-lived, and he would go on to pursue producing and directing on the aforementioned comedy classics. It's Alec Guinness's portrayal of Fagin, though, that resonates with the viewer. It's at once a humble and intimidating performance that really sits atop the treats that this adaptation has to offer. Guy Green's cinematography should also be praised, from the stark shots of Oliver's pregnant, destitute mother on the moor in the storm looking for shelter to give birth to her baby, to the dark and dreary London streets. Dickensian London is perfectly represented here. Whether you've read Dickens' classic or have only seen the films, the legacy of Oliver Twist lives on and continues to delight fans young and old. Both films are essential viewing from Crawford-Clark Close-Up. What are your thoughts on the various Oliver adaptations over the years? How many have you seen? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and please subscribe to the channel for more. You can find Crawford-Clark Close-Up on Facebook and Twitter, and you can email us your suggestions for the channel, crawfordclarkcloseup@gmail.com. Coming up, we've got a month of new and classic horror reviews. We'll be celebrating Halloween by taking you back 50 years to Roman Polanski's seminal Rosemary's Baby. We'll also be looking at the 45th anniversary this year of The Exorcist, and we'll be uncovering our thoughts on this year's Hereditary. Don't miss October 2018 on Crawford-Clark Close-Up. For now, thanks for watching, and until next time, that's a wrap.